Greetings, boys and girls. In today's video, we're going to review place value. We've been doing place value since the beginning of the school year. And I just wanted to go back over just the place value concepts so that we can continue to see the patterns that exist in them. Now in this chart, you'll notice that they call the first period the trendsetters period. That is not the actual name. This is actually called the units period, but what I really loved about this one is they called it trendsetters because it starts a pattern. So starting with the ones period, the ones place value, we go ones, then the tens, then the hundreds. Then when we go to the thousands period, which is the blue period, we have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. And then we see the pattern repeated again when we have 1 million, 10 million, and the 100 millions place. And so forth with the billions, trillions, and as the place values get much larger, we will see the same thing. So now I want to look at a particular place value. So I'm going to look at the thousands place. I know that as I move to the left, my place values get larger, while moving to the right, my place values will get smaller. So at the current time, I have a 7 in the thousands place. I would write that as 7,000. 7, and then 3 zeros after that. If I'm thinking to myself, what is 10 times 7,000? All I need to do is imagine my 7 moving one place value to the left, because the 10,000s place is 10 times the value of the thousands place. Therefore, 10 times 7,000 would be 70,000. Notice that we simply added another 0 to 7,000 to make 10 times as much. That's because when I multiply a whole number, I'm talking about a number without a decimal, by 10, I can simply add a 0 to the end. And just as I can think of 10 times as much as this 7 in the thousands place, I can think of 1/10 of that amount. So when I think of 1/10, I'm thinking that's the same thing as taking that amount and dividing it by 10. Okay, because I'm thinking instead of having what I have, I'm only looking at, if I had that amount divided into 10 pieces, I want one of those 10 pieces. So if I'm looking at 1/10 of 7,000, I am simply going to go one place value to the right, because going to the right, my place values get smaller. So now I can look at 1/10 of 7,000 as 700. So I simply moved from the thousands place, the 7 here, to now I have my 7 is now in the hundreds place. So I am at 700. If you're looking at the numbers, you'll notice that I simply took a 0 away from the end when I divided my whole number by 10. Again, I'm talking about whole numbers, not decimals. So we first started talking about whole numbers, and then recently we started talking about decimals. And decimals are simply numbers that have a special decimal point in them and some digits to the right of it. Anytime we're talking about coins, we are talking about decimals, because when we think about our money, if we have change, anything less than a dollar bill, we are going to have a decimal point in that money. Also, when we're just thinking about a lot of things are not whole numbers, so we have parts of a whole. If you're running a race, you might run 1/10 of a second. That would also be another decimal. Now, I want us to pay attention to something. We have a place value labeled the tenths place, and it is one place value to the right of the ones place. What I love about this place value is it's the tenths place and it's 1/10 of the ones place. So it just helps me remember. And then as I go 1/10 of that, imagine breaking my tenth up and dividing that by 10. I then get to the hundredths place, and that is even smaller than the tenths place. It's actually 1/10 of the size of the tenths place. So even with decimals, as we move to the right, we are going 1/10 of the previous place value. And as we move to the left, our place values get larger, and we're looking at 10 times as much. Let's think about the hundredths place for a second. Written as a decimal, the hundredths place would be 0.01 or 0.0, whatever the digit is in that place. So I'm going to think about pennies, and that's why I wrote a P. So 0.01 would represent 1 penny. If I have 10 pennies, I can actually trade it out for another coin, and you guys know what that coin is. That would be a dime. I can go to a dime. So if I get to 10 over here, I can't write 10 in that one place value, and I actually can then put a 1 in the tenths place and then have my 0 in the hundredths place. So I could have something like 0.10 when I get to 10 pennies. Now let's think about it. If I get to 10 dimes, well, a lot of us are already ready to say what that's going to equal. Once I get to 10 dimes, I then have a dollar. So I would simply write a 1.0, 1.00. That would be my $1. So just understand that 10 times as many tenths is going to give us that many dollars. 1/10 of however many tenths I have is going to give us that many pennies. Okay, I always like to go back to money because that's something that I use on a regular basis, and I can relate everything back to that when I'm thinking about these decimals. Now we're going to practice just being able to write these numbers, these decimals, in different forms. So the number that I've written here on our chart, you're going to actually do this on your paper as well, so pull out that accountability sheet. But I've written 43,002 and 12 hundredths. Notice how I read that. Once I got to the decimal, I said and. Okay? And then after I said that, I looked at what was to the right of the decimal, and I had the number 12. So I said 12, and then I said the last place value, which is hundredths. I didn't say 1/10 and 2 hundredths. So again, that's 43,002 and 12 hundredths. So writing the standard form for this is relatively simple. I simply wrote the numbers, the digits, 43,002 and 12 hundredths. Now I'm going to write the word form. I simply write the same exact words that I say. So when I would read it, I would read 43,002 and 12 hundredths, and I'm going to simply write the same thing. Boys and girls, make sure that when you write this down, that you are paying attention to the spelling, because we don't want to be in the habit of spelling things incorrectly. So if you need to press pause on the video so that you can see this and then be able to spell it, go ahead and do that. And I'll give you a few moments. And then the last part that we're going to do is write this number in expanded form. So when I write the number in expanded form, I am simply writing the value of each digit in this number, and I'm separating the values by those plus signs. All right. So now I have 40,000 plus, oh, I have a typo. So I just caught my typo. I almost didn't put the right thing there. I had 42,000 and not 43,000, 2 and 12 hundredths. So I've corrected that in the word form. And looking back at expanded form, I have 40,000 plus 3,000 plus 2 plus 1/10 plus 2 hundredths. Now notice, I'm writing it a little differently than how I say it when I get to the decimals, but I am making sure that each digit gets its own value. Okay, so the 1 in the tenths place is equal to 1/10, 0.1, and the 2 in the hundredths place is equal to 0.02. All right, I'll give you a moment to write that down on your chart. Let's do another one of these together. Now we have a number that is a little bit larger. Now we have 1,030,691 and 2 hundredths. I'm going to write that in standard form, and that's the easy part. Writing it in standard form is simply writing the digits. I made sure that I put my commas to separate my periods, and then I put my decimal point to separate my parts of a whole, the tenths and hundredths. Now I'm going to move on to the word form. And thankfully for the word form, I simply get to write down the same thing I would say when I see this number, 1,030,691 and 2 hundredths. This one was a little long to write, but not too much. So 1,030,691 and 2 hundredths. Please again check your spelling so that we're in the practice of writing things correctly. I'll give you a few more moments on that. The last form we're going to do is our expanded form. Expanded form is really, really important because when we write an expanded form, we are acknowledging the value of each digit. Okay? So we're going to write the value of each digit and we're separating them by plus signs. So now you can see that I wrote 1,000,000 plus 30,000 plus 600 plus 90 plus 1 plus 2 hundredths. I didn't put the zeros for the place values that had a 0 as their digit. I don't have to write that. If you want to write that, that is not a problem. And I'll just tell you, it is so easy to do expanded form when I actually use my place value chart and write the numbers in there. So if you need to create this so that it's easier for you to write expanded form, I highly recommend it on other assignments. Go ahead and get that written down as well if you haven't already. Boys and girls, in today's lesson, we simply reviewed place value, and we added the decimal place values to what we've already been doing. Notice with our place value, I'm going to pull up a chart again. Notice with our decimal place values that we have another pattern that is created. On the right side of the decimal, we go from tenths to hundredths to thousandths to 10,000ths, to 100,000ths, to millions. Now in 4th grade, we're only responsible for the tenths and the hundredths place, but the pattern is the same thing that we have going the other direction on the left of the decimal, with the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. We just added TH to the end because now we're talking about a part of a whole. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing your accountability sheets. Take care.